Greg, and you should be ready to go.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Obviously, most of you know who I am. I'm Sean Aiken, the superintendent of the Shaler Area School District. And today, Dr. Brian O'Black, our assistant superintendent, and myself will actually take about 15 to 20 minutes to present our district transition to 4-day instruction in this parent town hall meeting. And then after this opportunity for us to share, we're going to take questions. On our next slide actually just gives a little bit of protocol for some of the Q&A. So as I mentioned, the Q&A session will follow this with our administrative team. Guidelines prior to that will be shared regarding commenting procedures. And I just ask that all of you at this time, please keep your microphones muted during the presentation. Thank you very much. So our transition goals, as we transition into this 4-day instructional model, we thought specifically about what do we want to accomplish. Obviously, first and foremost is we want to provide more in-person instruction for our youngest students, providing in-person academic instruction, educational services for grades K to 3 first, and then 4 to 6 following the following week on March 15th. We believe that our youngest learners need that face-to-face time, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later in this presentation. Another thing that we talk often about is finding the right balance between meeting needs of our students, both academically, social, and emotionally, but then also making sure that we're protecting the health and safety of our entire community, our students, our staff, and that's the balance that we try to find. The third piece, as we've stated since day one of this 11 and a half months that we've been through, is really looking at the safety and security for our entire school community. That's been prevalent and relevant in every single decision that we've made along the way. And we'll continue to keep that as a top priority.
So during the month of February, the school district issued a survey to our families K through 12 regarding the possibility of returning to 4-day in-person instruction. And during that survey, we received 2,692 responses, and you will see through the next several slides a summary of those responses. It's important to note that a 1 was signifying that they were not comfortable, with a 5 signifying that they were very comfortable. So you will see the first question that we posed to families was, how comfortable are you with returning your child to 4-day-a-week in-person instruction while Allegheny County is still designated as being in a substantial level of community transmission? During that, you can see, roughly 591 responses indicate, it was about 22% indicated that they were not comfortable, all the way up to 5 being very comfortable. We had about 46.7%, or close to 1,256 respondents who said that they were very comfortable with their children returning to school, even in that substantial level of transmission. The second question that we posed was how comfortable you were with the district deviating from the CDC recommendation of 6 feet of social distancing in order to facilitate the 4-day-a-week in-person instruction. Knowing that there will be areas within the buildings that we will be able to accommodate the 6 feet, we also acknowledge that that just is not possible in spaces such as school buses, classrooms, and other areas throughout the district. Again, 2,692 responses to that. We had, roughly 702 unique responses that or equivalent to 26% indicated that they were not comfortable with that occurring, but all the way up to, very comfortable, roughly 39%, or 1,046 unique responses that indicated that they would be very comfortable. Knowing that school district transportation, as we move to 4-day instruction, that it may be different than what families are currently set up for now with 2-day-a-week instruction in person. we wanted to gauge how many families would need to use school district transportation and their comfort level of 6 feet of social distancing not being possible on the school bus. You will see in the pie chart below that nearly 55% of our respondents indicated that they would need school district provided transportation, even though 6 feet of social distancing would not be feasible. And then finally, we wanted to gauge where our families were regarding the decision to either return to 4-day-a-week instruction or remain or possibly transition into the 100% virtual learning model. You'll see here of the respondents, nearly 75% said that they would opt for their child to attend school 4 days per week, even if the 6 feet of social distancing could not be achieved, with roughly 25% saying they would remain in or transition to the 100% virtual learning model. So again, just a summary of the data that we were able to collect and use with our school leadership team to plan and determine what the timeline would be that subsequently we recommended to the board for the approval to move to the 4-day in-person instruction model. And now we are asking families, while that was where they stood at that particular time in February, as all of our families on this call know, we've now asked families to make that commitment to either returning to 4-day-a-week instruction or remaining or transitioning to the 100% virtual model.
So a question that we are asked frequently is, why are we looking to transition at this time to 4-day instruction? As I mentioned a little bit earlier in the presentation, is we believe that our youngest learners require this direct contact with their teachers, in-person learning, face-to-face, just the importance of that age range, engaging, looking at our kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and third grade students and what's age appropriate. The social interactions with their peers and also with the teachers really drove this decision. The second piece is really around the mitigation, or excuse me, the transmission that occurs with the youngest learners. We are finding significant research and data that supports that there is lower transmissions that occur at the younger age than the secondary age students. So that was another piece. Obviously, as Dr. O'Black just mentioned, social distancing is still a concern. We recognize that. We are going to socially distance to the greatest extent possible on the school buses and the classrooms, but we also understand that we're not going to be able to maintain 6 feet at all times in those spaces. In the cafeteria, when students are unmasked and eating, students are required to be 6 feet apart. And so we not only are going to use our cafeteria, but also some gymnasiums and other spaces in the schools to make sure that we can adequately distance our students when they are eating their lunches or breakfast. And then the final piece is just to kind of reiterate this message that our students do best when they're here with us, engaging with our highly trained and highly professional staff. We believe this is the best place for them. So this is, you've seen the dashboard, and Dr. O'Black's going to talk a little bit more about that, but just a breakdown of our schools right now, kind of where we're at. Obviously, we just reset this for our middle school and high school and elementary school recently because we've had some school closures, but we have 19 active cases in the district at this time, 16 students and 3 staff members. You'll see the numbers there. The elementary school has 1 positive case and Scott Primary has 2. We watch these numbers very closely because as I will state later, we have to follow our attestation agreement that we've signed with the state and follow this 14-day rolling period. One of the pieces that was stated that just supports kind of this move to 4-day instruction, Dr. Rachel Levine back in January made a statement that was actually in the Post-Gazette and Pennsylvania Department of Health website. And I think it is pertinent and relevant for this discussion today is while we can't eliminate the entire risk of disease transmission within a school setting, we recognize that the recent studies have shown that there is less risk at the elementary age, that K-5 range. And so there's research that supports that it may be safer for younger children, particularly elementary grade students, to return to in-person instruction. So as we make this transition for cohort A and B to come 4 days, we also recognize the need to continue on with cohort C. And I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on this slide, but it just really reiterates the fact that we need to be flexible during this school year. We recognize that, there are families that do not feel comfortable sending their children to school at this time. They don't feel comfortable with the 4-day model. We've provided this cohort C option so that there would be continued relationships built with not only their peers, but also their teachers. And there would be an opportunity for students to be a part of the Shaler Area School District while learning virtually from home. So this is an important component of this model, and we're going to continue everything that we've offered in the first 5-6 months of this school year. Students in cohort C will remain with their assigned teachers and classes for the remainder of the school year. And there will still be the quarantine isolation periods, positive cases, similar to what we've done for the first 5-6 months of this school year.
One of the questions that we receive frequently is, what will mitigation strategies look like when we have a large portion of our students in the building for 4-day-a-week instruction? It's important to note that students and staff will continue to be required to adhere to the universal face masking order as outlined by the Department of Health. As Dr. Aiken has stated and will continue to reiterate throughout the course of this presentation and with our staff is, physical distancing of 6 feet in our school cafeteria remains a requirement for all students when they have their face coverings removed, and that we will maintain 6 feet of physical distance between individuals to the fullest extent that we possibly can. The district will be unable to accommodate 6 feet of physical distancing in all scenarios, and particularly in our classroom spaces, hallways, in some other areas. It's important to note, in order for the physical distancing of 6 feet in the cafeterias to be maintained, students may be eating in different locations than the school cafeteria. We're going to be using gymnasium space, library space, classrooms that may not be utilized during a lunch period, et cetera, just so that we're able to accommodate that in all of our buildings. And then additionally, in terms of transportation, knowing that more families may require transportation as we go back 4 days a week, capacity limits on school bus routes will need to increase. Students will once again share seats. We will have up to 2 students share a seat on a school bus at a time, and up to 3 primary elementary age siblings can share a seat on a school bus. If your child was previously in cohort C and you will be moving to 4-day in-person instruction, school transportation information will be provided in advance of returning to 4-day-a-week instruction via Infinite Campus. So once we receive all of the commitments back from our families and we review the transportation question in the questionnaire, we will be adding those students onto the bus routes as needed.
So earlier in the year, at the beginning of the school year, we communicated some of the cleaning measures that would take place when students transitioned into the hybrid model of schooling. Well, these same strategies are going to continue in the 4-day. In fact, we've hired additional part-time custodians to help in our schools throughout, especially during the lunch periods in the middle part of the day. Those additional staff members that have been hired along with our custodial staff, they clean rooms throughout the day, they clean hallways, they're in the cafeteria, they're in the bathrooms. They do a great job moving throughout the school to do as much cleaning as they can throughout the course of the school day. One of the, as I talked a little bit about, was the part-time custodian. That's one thing that we've added. In addition to that, we've also added these electrostatic sprayers in each of our schools. And so we not only use these throughout the course of the day on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, but we also do some deep cleaning on Wednesdays and then also on the weekends as well. And we'll continue to do that throughout the course of this entire pandemic. So the face coverings, we talk about mitigation strategies, and still the number one mitigation strategy is around face coverings. And from the reports that we've received from our principals at the primary level and the elementary level, and then also from our classroom teachers, we understand the importance of this universal face covering order and the support that has been given from our students and staff at those levels. We're going to, continue to adhere to this face covering order. Back in November, we were presented with this attestation agreement from the state of Pennsylvania. At that time, it was mandating the face covering order changed slightly at that point in time. Obviously, face coverings are not required when students are eating and drinking and at least 6 feet apart. So in the cafeteria and some other spaces, but our staff and students are required to adhere to that 6 feet apart when eating and drinking. And then also there's an opportunity for some mask breaks throughout the course of the day for our students too. And again, that's requiring a 6 feet distance at that time as well. So this is a slide that we've been reviewing since the beginning of the year with our parents and families. And I think it's an important slide as we continue to add more students into the schools. As you can see in Group A and Group B, there's symptoms. We ask that all parents and guardians conduct a daily screening for these symptoms. You look on these lists here, and there's minor things like sore throats or fatigue and just some of the things, maybe headaches and a cough or something like that. But one of the things that we talk often about is in the early stages of COVID, some of these symptoms may seem very minor. So what we ask parents to do is, if any of these symptoms, whether in column A or column B here, are readily visible with your child, we ask that you keep your child home for that day and just join the cohort C model and learn from home. If it's just a sick day and there's just going to be one day out, this was a question that came up yesterday. There isn't a need to necessarily log in and do work that day. If a child is truly under the weather and is not feeling well, we want you to take the time to recover and come back and make up the work when the child is feeling better. That's important to note. One of the other things too that I mentioned last evening or yesterday afternoon with the other group too is we also are trying to create some consistency with this 4-day instruction. So if a child is not sick, not experiencing any of these symptoms, then we do expect them to come to school if they're committed to the 4-day in person. We understand the cohort C option is very convenient, but we also recognize that our students do best when they're learning here with us. So if you have any questions about any of this, as I'm going to mention here in a second, our school nurses, our school principals, teachers are great resources. And actually, thank you, Dr. O'Black, for transitioning the slide. If you have any questions about any of the symptom screening or anything like that, we ask that you contact your child's school nurse. They're an excellent resource. They can answer questions related to any of the symptom screenings. They can also answer questions related to any travel that you may be doing. We know that spring break is coming up. in early April, and we recognize that some families may be traveling at that time. If you are traveling, we ask that you communicate these travel plans with your school nurse and your school principal, and we can help you walk through any protocol that needs to be followed with that. So as I mentioned earlier, the attestation agreement, and in this attestation agreement, we as a school district really committed to adhering to the Department of Health's protocol, and specifically around universal face coverings, and then also around the 14-day rolling shutdown periods, and the periods where we're contact tracing and doing all those different things and determining if we can keep schools open or if we need to possibly transition to remote learning or virtual learning. So it's important to note that we as a school district have signed off on this attestation agreement along with the school board, and we are committed to following these procedures outlined by the Pennsylvania Department of Health.
As Dr. Aiken mentioned, we do comply with the guidelines for cases in schools, and you will see in the chart on this slide, these are the recommendations for school buildings following the identification of cases while Allegheny County remains in the substantial level of community transmission. And for our school community, most recently, we experienced these closures at our elementary, middle school, and high school, but they do apply to all of our schools across the district. So for the purpose of this call, each of our primary schools falls into the small school building category. So you will see there, if between 2 and 4 students in the same building do test positive for COVID within a 14-day rolling period, the recommendation is to close that school for 3 to 7 days to clean and conduct contact tracing. It's important to note a few different things with that. That's 3 to 7 days. That's not necessarily 3 to 7 school days. So for example, if a case, if we reach our identified case count on a Friday, we may be able to use Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, or, subsequently on a Thursday, we would use a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So again, it may not necessarily be 3 school days based on when we hit that threshold to trigger a potential school closing. Additionally, once a building closes, as Dr. Aiken mentioned a little bit earlier in the presentation, while the cases still remain active in the dashboard, they do not count towards the 14-day rolling closure. So as soon as you close a building, once you reopen that, your case count sets to 0, and then any new cases from the reopening date then will track towards that 14-day rolling closure. So again, we understand it's complex, but it is a model that we are using in order to make sure that when we do reach that threshold, that we're taking the appropriate steps to clean and conduct that contact tracing. The COVID dashboard continues to be in place and updated as cases become reported into the school district. We will continue to send email notifications to all families and staff members. And it's also important to note that within the dashboard, we are counting students who were in school during the infectious period and who are in cohorts A and B. So students who test positive that are in cohort C are not reported within the dashboard, and students who were not in school during the symptomatic period are also not counted in the dashboard. So there's been a few questions about, who's counted, who's not counted. And then the final question that we've received in some of our presentations is, what date is being used? And the school district uses the date in which we receive notification of the positive case. That seems to be the most controllable date that we have. Otherwise, it's trying to determine when the onset of symptoms were, and just a lot of information that's very hard for us to confirm and nail down. So we do report a case in the dashboard once we have received confirmation from a parent or guardian that a child or an employee has tested positive.
So this is our final slide for this presentation today. And obviously, last Friday, you all received a parent commitment form that was emailed out. And we are in the process of collecting those commitment forms. Obviously, today we're in a town hall meeting for K3. We're going to do parent and staff town hall meetings next week for grades 4 through 6. We are collecting those parent commitment forms. The K-3 commitment forms are due Friday, February 26th. The commitment form for grades 4 through 6 will be due Friday, March 5th. And then on Monday, March 8th, we're going to transition to four-day instructional model for grades K through 3. And then March 15th, we're going to transition grades 4 through 6. And we're still working on the 7 to 12 piece, and that has a lot to do with the numbers in Allegheny County and the school district positivity rates as well for grades 7 through 12. So that's the timeline for this transition. And at this time, we're going to transition to the Q&A session. Dr. O'Black is going to review the protocol for this session.
Thank you, Dr. Aiken. For the Q&A session, we would just ask that you please raise your hand by using the reaction tool at the bottom of your screen. And when recognized, you can unmute your mic and state your name. Just as a reminder, as we've had in all of our previous town hall meetings, individual questions that are of a personal nature should be directed to your building principal or the appropriate department. So to begin our questions today, we will go to Kristen.
Hi, thank you. I have a couple of questions in regards to the travel quarantine. You briefly mentioned it about contacting either the principal or the nurse, but what's happening, I'm still seeing people who are going to hotspots and then reporting to in-person classes a couple of days later. So is there going to be a travel quarantine for people who are leaving the state, especially if they're going to Florida, which is their right? Or is there not? Thank you.
And obviously, it's, we have close to 4,000 students and close to 500 staff members. So it's very difficult to track exactly where everybody goes. And it really is the honor system and communicating with us, the school nurse, the principals, when people are going and working through the quarantine period. So yes, we do enact the travel quarantine period. But again, there's times that I'm sure that people are traveling out of state for different reasons. It could be an athletic tournament. It could be a vacation. It could be visit with family. That maybe they are not sharing. That's always a possibility. So we strongly encourage that people are communicating with us so that we can effectively implement the travel quarantine.
I think, Dr. Aiken, if I could also add, the Pennsylvania's travel quarantine only applies to children over the age of 11.
Thanks, Dr. O'Black, for adding that. And Kristen, you mentioned you had a few questions. Was there any other questions you had today?
Oh yeah, but I don't want to steal anybody else's time. But I guess to kind of not piggyback off of that, but is there a way that in order to limit our child's risk that we can just opt in sending them a couple of days out of the 4-day? I realize that makes it difficult, but just trying to think about limiting exposure and the amount of time while still giving them an option to kind of go in, even if it like remained on a consistent schedule. Let's say if there was an opportunity to just keep the first 2 days like they are and then do virtual the remaining days.
Yeah. We are asking parents to either commit to the 4-day or the cohort C, and for this reason, the trying to navigate keeping track of who's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, who's 4-day, and the amount of work just with cohort C as well too. I mean, we recognize that some families may not feel comfortable with the 4-day piece and may have preferred, or staying in the hybrid, or at least, doing some, variation of that. But we feel strongly that we're going to do everything we can to make sure that that 4-day experience is safe for our students, understanding that there are some limitations with some of the social distancing, but we really are in need of some consistency. And I think for teachers trying to manage that piece, and principals and schools trying to manage that piece of navigating with a 2-day, a 4-day, and cohort C at the same time would be incredibly difficult. And so that's why we've really focused in on this 4-day piece, and then also the cohort C.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Our next questions are from Ashley.
Hi.
Hi.
So,
If the outbreaks would get worse again, heaven forbid, is there a plan you have set in what you would do, going back to 2-day or all virtual for everybody, or?
yeah, I think that's something that we have to always keep in the back of our minds. If this is not successful, and if we're having to shut down schools or transition to remote learning frequently, and really breaks up the learning and breaks up the routine and the pattern, then we would need to make that decision. Also looking at the county numbers too. Right now, the county numbers are going in the right direction and have been going in that direction for the last 4 weeks. I mean, you hear rumors of these different strands and different things with COVID, but the reality is that we hope that it's going to continue to move in the right direction. However,
Right.
if the county and our local school district, if the numbers, skyrocketed and we had to continue to close schools and transition to remote, then we'd have to relook at this again and determine what is the safe and best option for our students and our staff.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next question is from Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Hello. I hope it's me, Chris, and I hope there's not another Chris.
No, you're good.
All right. I have 2 questions. And the first, piggybacking a little bit off of the first questions, would be, could you comment on why, so in taking this, the return to 4-day survey, it really kind of broke down into, are you going to send your kid or are you not going to send your kid? There wasn't, I feel like looking at your numbers of the percentage that was very comfortable, but then looking at the end number of who's all going to send their kids still, that some of us are put in a situation where we don't really have a choice. We kind of have to send our kids. And I was just wondering, hoping for a comment on why one of the questions wasn't simply, would you prefer to stay in hybrid? I wonder what the data would have looked like if there was a rank order of what's your most preferred, go back full time, stay in hybrid. But the way it was constructed, that didn't seem like it was an option at all. It was either we're going back. It seemed like we're going back, and just wanted to comment on that.
Sure. And I think that's a, fair concern that you've expressed and was expressed previously as well. I think, looking at other districts and seeing the success that they've had in the 4-day or 5-day at the elementary and primary level, I think was really encouraging for us that we wanted to move in this direction. Obviously, we want to know how parents and guardians and our families are feeling. So it's important for us to survey and kind of gather where people are at this time. What's the comfort level and how is it going to be impacted? I know that we have close to 30% of our families that are stating that they're going to stay in cohort C as we make this transition. And we want to do our best to meet those needs. I think understanding too that the end goal is to get students back, whether it be 4-day, 5-day, some consistency in the classroom, recognizing that the academic struggles, the struggles that this presents for our families, and then also recognizing some of the social and emotional struggles as well too. And this has been obviously a very challenging year, almost a full year now for all of us. And we feel strongly that we need to move towards that 4-day, almost, a full capacity for our youngest learners because of that academic and the social and emotional needs of our students. So that's really why we didn't, divvy that up into, would you prefer, 4-day, 5-day, 2-day, or potentially, virtual option. And really, the goal is to move to the 4-day, but we also wanted to recognize hearing from our families, hearing from our staff was very important in this process too, just to understand where people are at.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question, quickly, and I'm sorry if this was on a slide. I'm listening at work and trying to get things done. But with respect to the masks, do the teachers have the latitude to impose suspensions, let's say, on individuals who are not wearing them correctly, especially as we get, it may not have been as big of a deal when they were properly distanced, but now that in a classroom setting, they're not going to be properly distanced. I know personally, my daughter has mentioned a few individuals in her class that have to be constantly reminded to wear it correctly. And I understand that they're small kids as well. But I just was wondering, with not being able to adhere to the proper distancing, if there will be some sort of system where individuals not adhering to proper mask wear might be asked to, or I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And to be honest with you, at this point, I mean, we've had a couple situations at the high school where we've dealt with some insubordination and some mask refusal, but in most situations, if not close to all situations, we really want to really encourage and teach and educate about why it's important to mask at this time. And especially as we transition to 4-day with more students in the classroom, more students in the school. And I do believe that our teachers have done a phenomenal job, and our principals have modeled this as well too, just to really encourage. I think that before we go to suspension or any disciplinary measures, I think really the goal has to be to teach and reinforce these messages and make sure that parents are communicated with, that there is the process. Now obviously we want to keep our students safe and we want to keep our staff safe. So it's imperative, especially as we put maybe up to 18 to 20 to 22 students in a classroom where we can't be 6 feet apart. The masks and the desk shields are so important. And so I think it's the process of educating students and working with those students possibly that maybe don't see the value or don't feel comfortable, trying to find out what is it that's causing that. What's the impetus for that refusal or that maybe inappropriate wearing? I mean, you see I don't know if you follow any of the high school athletic events, but some of these athletic competitions where districts mandated masks, the mask is all the way down on the chin. So it really is about educating and getting our students to understand the importance of this and having our staff really work with them on that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Our next question is from Gina.
Hi, I just had a question about the asynchronous days being on Wednesday. My son goes to Scott, and I have friends at the other primary schools as well. And there just seems to be a lot of discrepancy, I guess, between how the asynchronous days are worked. But a majority of the parents that I've talked to, they seem to, the kids are kind of done within a couple hours, at the very least by lunchtime, because it's all recorded and the way that the teachers are assigning the work, I guess. So I just didn't know is that going to be left to the teacher's discretion, or is there going to be a little bit more oversight from the district's part of, trying to encourage them to have, maybe mornings of doing the virtual thing so that the kids can still see each other? Or yeah, does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, absolutely, Gina. And, we'll be working with our especially our primary principals right now on this. One of the questions came up yesterday too about this issue. And, I think there may be some misconceptions or misperceptions at times. And I think it's important to note that Wednesday is definitely not a blow-off day. It is a work day. It is a learning day for students. And they could include a variation of synchronous, asynchronous, maybe tutorial time, remediation time. There's a lot of different things that occur on Wednesdays. And so maybe we'll be working, what we'll do is we'll work with our principals on getting information out to parents about what Wednesdays should look like at the primary level. And because it may look different from primary to elementary and elementary to middle school and high school, but we do want to note that Wednesdays is a work day, and that is a student work day and also a staff work day. And I don't want the perception to be out there that, for some reason, there's not learning going on those days. And then the other piece too is just the realization that this is with cohort C, there's a lot of work that's involved with Wednesdays as well too, just making sure that they're getting what they need, some touch points with teachers on Wednesday. So it's kind of a conglomeration of a lot of different things. And I think if we can work with our primary principals on that, and they could articulate with families what that needs to look like or continue to look like as we make this transition, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, because just saying the word asynchronous doesn't really give a lot of direction to Joe Schmo like me at home to really understand what it is that the teachers are doing,
Sure.
And the work, like what you said, just for us to kind of understand better, because what I am looking at is my kid getting done with school in 2 hours and then having a free day. So I'm not, the kids need to play. He's only 6. So I'm not opposed to that necessarily, but I'm also I'm not a working parent, or I'm not a parent who's, sending their kid to a tutoring thing or things like that. So I think maybe, yeah, if there was some kind of communication for us to have a better understanding of what the goal of the asynchronous Wednesday is, aside from the strict, the cleaning measures and those kind of things, but what the goals are for the teachers and the kids as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Gina, one of our secondary principals actually brought this up after the board meeting last week. And one of the things that we talked about too is finding the right balance for students as well. This is a very difficult year. We have to think about the amount of time on screens for kids, the amount of stress. I know grades, have suffered. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to all of this that kind of fit together. And so I think it's important that we try to be as clear as we possibly can so that a parent doesn't feel like, is my child getting everything that they need, or are we missing something? Is there something that we're not aware of with synchronous, asynchronous? And so I think working with our principals and getting that information out to try to, create some clear expectations for students and families during this time, I think would be very helpful.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Our next question is from Christine.
I'll assume you meant Kristen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. I double checked through the chat to make sure it wasn't someone else. Thank you. Sorry, so many questions. Great questions, everybody. Took a bunch off my list. my last question, I guess it's just in regards to people who are having symptoms and maybe took a test because of that, received a negative test. And so they thought it was prudent to return back to school immediately after that negative test, even though they were still having some symptoms, which obviously can be attributed to other things. So I guess that's just my question. I was under the impression, at least by the CDC, that if you had symptoms, and even though you received a negative test, if you continue to have said symptoms, you should still be quarantining. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think, first and foremost, we definitely want to monitor this closely. And I think some of our staff, are concerned about this very question that you've raised, is when is it safe for a student to come back? And I think it's important that our families are working closely with our school nurses so they can determine what's the appropriate amount of time. And Dr. O'Black, maybe if you could just clarify a little bit around the 10-day, 14-day. And I think that, there's, I think maybe some parents may think after a week or so that it's safe, but I think it's important that we work together on this and really utilize the expertise of our school nurses. And they are our health professionals on staff. But Dr. O'Black, anything that you would add to that?
No, I think exactly what you said. Right now, especially being in cold and flu season, moving into, what will be the peak of seasonal allergies. There are a lot of different scenarios. So that's why our school nurses treat each case, individual when it comes to identifying, are these COVID symptoms that require a testing, and our school nurses, are typically looking for a PCR test. They're not looking for results from a rapid test. While they'll certainly take those results, they're going to want to wait for the PCR results to return. And then they will always, indicate to parents to consult with their pediatrician, and take that medical advice. So it really, it's not a one size fits all. It is really looking at each individual case, assessing it, and seeking the medical expertise, either from the school nurse or from the pediatrician.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Our next question is from Nicole. Nicole, are you still with us? Okay, our next question is from Kimberly.
Hi, I just have a couple, hopefully quick questions. First of all, the website said how many respondents you've had to the parent surveys. You've also mentioned you have 4,000 students, but many of those students are siblings. What was the 27,000? What's the percentage of what the total respondents would have been, like turnout, yes, of households?
So the results from that survey are individual unique students. Each family was asked to complete a survey for each child that they have that attends the school.
I understand that, but the obvious thing would be the parents would answer the same for each kid. You understand?
That is not, I would say that has not necessarily been true. We do have families that have their secondary children in cohort C.
Okay.
Their primary age children in hybrid. So we have actually seen that it's not an across the board family decision.
Okay. I guess I'm thinking because I have one in primary and one in fourth grade. So for me, it was pretty much the same. So that's my line of thinking on that one.
Yeah, it really varies based on, family circumstances and, does an individual child within that household have a medical condition that would necessitate cohort C? So it can vary within households, and we have seen that just like other districts have.
Okay, I guess my thinking was if we're basing all of this on if only like 25% of the people responded versus you know what I'm trying to say. My second question is, what is the actual closure tolerance? You put up that matrix, but I noticed at the bottom of a lot of the emails, it was, it would be this, but in communications with the health department, we're deciding not to close at this time because of this and that. But if you're going to have more students in, I'm assuming contact tracing is going to take a little bit longer. Is it going to be a much lower threshold of, okay, well, we are going to actually close for the 3 days versus you don't
Dr.
think they're
Black,
connected?
Dr. Black, if you could maybe pull up that slide and then I can explain that, Kimberly. One of the things that's actually going to be communicated this week with our families, and we've actually met with our 4 primary staffs this week. So what we'd like to do, so if you'll see here in this slide where, large schools, 6 to 10, medium schools 4 to 6, and small schools 2 to 4. And as you stated, a lot of times we were working with our medical team here, and then also the Allegheny County Health Department, determine, was there a relationship or any transmission that may have occurred between this student and that student, or that teacher and that student. And so we were doing a lot of contact tracing and interconnectedness and trying to determine how that factored in, because we recognized that if there was transmission based on the feedback that we were receiving from the Allegheny County Health Department, is that was a little bit more serious, a little bit more critical. If there was a kindergarten student and a 3rd grade student were positive, but they didn't have any connection, we viewed that maybe a little bit differently. Moving forward, though, and we're going to include this in the communication with families this week, is we're actually going to pick the middle number. And when that middle number hits, regardless of whether there's interconnectedness or not, we are going to shut down schools for 3 days. And I think for some of the reasons that you've stated today is, what exactly is it? Is it clear? Is it not clear? Is it clear to staff? Is it clear to our families? And so we want to make this abundantly clear. And we recognize that as we bring more students in, we're going to have more contact tracing and more, possibility of transmission. And so because of that, we want to be definitively clear. And so at the primary level, it says 2 to 4 students in the small school buildings. Well, what we're going to do is we've picked the number in the middle, and we've identified that when there are 3 cases in that 14-day rolling period, that we are going to close school and transition to remote learning. So that way it's going to be clear for our families, it's going to be clear for our staff, and I feel like that's a necessary step right now. And that will be communicated in a couple days here at the end of this week with our families.
Okay, thank you. That's exactly what I meant, was because I knew it was going to take a lot more time because it has to be a lot of work. And it's like, well, I get it, but I don't get it. We're working with them, but yet we're not following it. And we're already going to be deviating now. And it's, so I appreciate, and I look for the clarification.
Sure. And I also want to state too that we did absolutely still follow this within these recommendations. So even if there were interconnectedness, maybe what we looked at though is if there weren't, like say at the elementary school, then we allowed that number to get to the high end to 6 before we determined, okay, we've got to, shut down. Well, we don't want to wait. We're not trying to put anyone in danger at all here. And so we are actually going to follow this to a T and be a little bit more concrete with it, and not be on the front end, back end determining on whether or not there was interconnectedness with the cases.
Okay, and just clarification, I know privacy, we don't know who the staff or who the child is when it's reported, but the schools do across buildings, correct? Like if my daughter would get sick, or somebody in her class which have made her an exposure, well, my son's in the elementary school, there's cross communication, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, our administrative team is working together on this, and we do the contact tracing with families and everything to determine, you know, who needs to quarantine. So there is an understanding of, you know, siblings and, you know, all that goes into the whole piece of the contact tracing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks, Kim.
Dr. Aiken, those are all the questions that we have this afternoon.
Well, just in closing this out today, I just want to thank all the families, parents, and guardians who were with us today, and also the staff members and principals who were with us today too. We appreciate the questions, great questions today, very good questions yesterday too. This is a team effort. We're working together, and we're going to continue to move forward and do our very best to get our students back into school, and at the same time, keep them safe and keep our staff safe. So thank you for joining us today, and we appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your school principal, your teachers, your school nurses, or either Dr. O'Black or myself. All right, thank you very much. Have a great day.